This is Sports Overdrive.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Sports Overdrive on June the 27th, 2014. My name is Taylor Jones and our first guest today is kind of a special guest. It seems like we bring bigger and bigger guests on as the show goes on. And today we're going to talk some Georgia State football. Georgia State Panthers moving into their second year in the Sun Belt Conference as well as their second year as an FBS school. They're taking on big opponents this season, including the University of Washington, Arkansas State, South Alabama, Appalachian State, Troy, Clemson, and the big one on October the 25th against the Georgia Southern Eagles. So to talk Georgia State Panther football, we brought in the voice of the Georgia State Panthers. It's Dave Cohen. Dave Cohen joining Sports Overdrive now. You can catch our next guests on the radio waves during the Georgia State University football games and other events surrounding Panther athletics. It's the voice of the Georgia State Panthers, David Cohen. And Mr. Cohen, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everything with you? And thanks for having me.
No problem. It's an honor to have you on, and everything's going rather fantastic this afternoon. The Georgia State football program, they're entering their fifth season of existence in 2014. They're second in the Sun Belt Conference, and you've been with the program from the very beginning. So when it was announced that Georgia State would begin their football program, what was the atmosphere at this university surrounding the decision?
Well, there was a lot of excitement. Georgia State just celebrated its centennial, its 100th year of existence, now in 101. And, it's one of those situations where if you look back at its origins, college athletics really, until about 50 years ago, never really played a part in the university's history. So about half of the university's existence was without athletics, and of course 96 years of that was without college football. But as the university has been transitioning to one that offers more of a traditional experience, at least as much of a traditional experience college-wise that you can offer being in the middle of downtown Atlanta as opposed to a small college town. There really were two things that the university did not have. Number one was student housing, and of course, if you have read or followed Georgia State at all, they're building a lot of student housing downtown all around the campus right now. There's close to 5,000 living on campus, and that number is growing as the years goes by. And of course, along with student housing, what's the other piece of the puzzle that offers, Georgia students a traditional experience? That's college football. We all know that. And in 2010, Georgia State debuted its football team under head coach Bill Curry. They had a winning season that first year and went 7-6. One of the greatest Georgia State athletic events had to have been that inaugural game at the Georgia Dome against Shorter University when we had a little over 31,000 at the Georgia Dome. And then, the football program has struggled the last 3 years, as some expected that it might. But the transition to the Sun Belt is underway. Coach Trent Miles took over for Bill Curry last year, and he now has the task of, trying to rebuild the program. I say rebuild in a very short amount of time coming out of Coach Curry's coaching watch, but at the same time, the program has grown quickly from non-existence to FBS bowl level, which is what it is this year in the Sun Belt Conference. So a lot has happened in a very short amount of time. Georgia State community is excited about it. Much like our basketball program, they're looking forward to a winning program, a winning season. And you know how Atlanta fans are. They gravitate towards winning, and so that's what we've got to do.
Looking back at that Thursday night in 2010 when the Panthers hosted Shorter and over 31,000 were in attendance for the first game at the Georgia Dome, since then, what have been some of the more exciting moments in the program's history, in your opinion?
The last couple of years, to be honest with you, there have not been that many exciting moments other than a touchdown here or a touchdown there. Certainly following the careers of Albert Wilson has been exciting. The funny thing about it is that for a program that is only 4 years old, we've already had two players drafted. One was drafted in the 6th round, Christo Bilukidi, drafted in the 6th round a couple of years ago by the Oakland Raiders, and he played with them for a couple of seasons and now is with the Cincinnati Bengals. And then this year, in the most recent draft, Ulrich John was drafted by the Indianapolis Colts in the 7th round, and of course he's hoping to make that roster. Albert Wilson signed as a free agent with the Kansas City Chiefs. From everything I hear, he's got a pretty good shot to hopefully make that roster there in Kansas City. Jake Masau, who was part of those first teams, was twice cut by the New York Giants. You know, we've had a few others. Jake, by the way, is on his way and is going to be playing in the Canadian Football League. So I guess some of the more exciting moments have been following some of the individual players while they've been at Georgia State, and a few of them once they've left Georgia State and have had the opportunity to continue playing. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the last three seasons, last year was a winless year, 0-12. Although they played pretty well, I guess one of the more exciting games last year was against Arkansas State in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Game we lost, but should have won or could have won. Lost that one 35-33, and really one of the better played games, that Georgia State played last year. And I know people will say, well, that's crazy. You gave up 35 points. We did, but it was one of the more exciting football games and really one of the ones that I felt we had a great shot to win, but just couldn't pull it out and get over the hump at the end. But, 0-12 last year, 1-10 the prior year, with the only win coming at Rhode Island in our one and only season at the FCS level in the Colonial Athletic Association before moving to the Sun Belt. And before that, we were 3-8. So as far as exciting moments on the field, there would have to be some individual moments, most of those on the offensive end involving Albert Wilson, who I just mentioned, trying to make the Kansas City Chiefs roster. But, Coach Miles, I think, was a great hire, much as Ron Hunter was for our basketball program. And I think he's got the program moving in the right direction. It's just, in football, it takes time and it takes patience. Also, it takes fundraising as well to get programs to the level that that everybody wants to see them attain. And I think that we will do that. Again, it's just going to take time to do it.
We'll move on to this season. It's Georgia State's first season as a bowl-eligible team, and they'll receive the special treatment, if you will, by getting the start. They're getting to start their season 3 days earlier when they host Abilene Christian on August the 27th, which is on a Wednesday, due to the other events that are going on at the Georgia Dome that weekend. They'll also face new opponents with the expansion of the conference, and we'll discuss that big game with Georgia Southern later on in the year very shortly. But looking at the season schedule, which games are you excited about, and which games do you feel that Panther fans should keep their eyes on this season?
Well, I know some folks will look at that Abilene Christian game and say to themselves, oh, yeah, that's going to be an easy game. That'll put that in the win column. I don't know, I guess I've just been around it too long that I'm cautiously optimistic. We lost 27 seniors off last year's team. Granted, it was a team that went 0-12, but there were still some pretty good players on that team, at least from an individual standpoint. So Coach Miles and the staff have the task of rebuilding while having to play a challenging schedule at the same time. Abilene Christian is making the jump from Division II to the FCS level, and they're playing in the Southland Conference. But they've had, at least as far as I've, from my research, they've had a winning season each of the last 3 years. And so they come into it much like any team comes into it. They're coming into the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, an NFL facility, and this is their first year as an FCS program. And, to be honest, they look at our record last year and see an 0-12, and they see an opportunity to beat a Division I program. So, we are going to have to batten down the hatches and buckle down and take this game just as seriously as we will when we play Georgia Southern in the Georgia Dome on October 25th, as well as, some big games on the road at Washington on September 20th, and then later on in the season having to go to Clemson on November 22. Those are games that sometimes the players seem to get up a little bit more for. But personally, I think, as you'll hear players say time and again, we got to take them one game at a time. And I think for a program like ours that really speaks true, you can't look too far down the schedule because Abilene Christian right now is the first opponent, and it's a quality opponent and one that, worries me to death because, I don't like, and I'm a Georgia State alum, as well as my 32 years, on the radio with Georgia State Athletics, but they scare me because they're hungry for a win. They see us as an opportunity, like I said, to beat a Division I program in an NFL facility in Atlanta. So we have got to be ready for Abilene Christian and not worry about New Mexico State in Week 2 or Air Force in Week 3.
Voice of the Georgia State Panthers, David Cohen, on Sports Overdrive this afternoon, and we'll now discuss the big one. the game October the 25th against the Georgia Southern Eagles, a game that could be the new start of the newest college rivalry in the state of Georgia. So what are your thoughts on the new rivalry?
Well, there had been rumors of Georgia Southern once we jumped to the Sun Belt, to Division I and the FBS level, that Georgia Southern would look to do the same as well. And, over the years, I've been there long enough to remember when Georgia State and Georgia Southern were in the old Trans-America Athletic Conference together, that league now known as the Atlantic Sun. Now, granted, we only faced each other in all sports other than football because we didn't have it, but it was a great rivalry, in my opinion, back when even it was, when the marquee sport in the rivalry was men's basketball. And I think now that we've got football, and obviously they've had football, or at least they brought it back since the York Russell days in the early 80s, so they're that much further ahead of us down the line, and certainly they've had a lot of success. I think it takes the rivalry to a new level, obviously, when you introduce football to it. So, for the most part, I think it's great that they've decided to jump up and join the Sun Belt Conference along with Georgia State. And although I don't think it'll ever get to the same level media-wise and recognition-wise because, there's so many years ahead of us, the way the state thinks of Georgia Tech in Georgia or over in Alabama with Alabama and Auburn, schools like that, I do think that on our level, I mean the high mid-major Sun Belt Conference level, that the Georgia State-Georgia Southern rivalry in football and all other sports will begin to take on more of a role and be recognized more as people see the Georgia Tech rivalry. Again, in our case, it's just going to take more time because this game coming up in late October in the Georgia Dome obviously is the first time the two schools have played. But I think it's great for college football. It's great for the state of Georgia that there's now another on the horizon recognized rivalry between Georgia State and Georgia Southern. And, I think it kind of gives the college football fan in the state another big rivalry game to kind of focus on. Again, it won't take on the same mass media appeal that Georgia Tech and Georgia does, but in our world, it will, and I'm looking forward to it.
Head coach of the Panthers, Trent Miles, he enters his second season as the head guy, and he also has offensive coordinator Jeff Jagodzinski, who many Falcons fans remember not only for his time with the Falcons, but he was also the head coach of the Boston College football program when current Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan was attending school there. So what are your thoughts on the coaching staff at Georgia State, and have you spoken with them lately? Do they have anything in store for 2014?
Well, it's one of the, you like to say it's one of the hardest working staffs in college football. Some people might look at you sideways like you're crazy, but when you didn't win a football game last year and went 0-12, those on the outside that maybe did not see every game or didn't really see practice and all that kind of stuff, they don't really know what goes on behind the scenes. The Georgia State football team, in all honesty, got better as the season went on. As I mentioned, that Arkansas State game that we could have, should have won in Jonesboro was a perfect sign. I mean, there were a number of games later on in the season that we lost that we very well, could have won. Specifically, a game against Texas State out in San Marcos, lost by a touchdown. Lost by a touchdown to Troy, 35-28. These are all games that were played in the second half of the season. So you could see signs of this team getting better. As I said, a little bit of the unknowing factor this year is that a number of the key players last year, when this team was getting better, are a majority of the seniors, the total of 27 seniors that this football team lost. So while there are a number of returning players, there are going to be a lot of new faces in this lineup. We did not run the football very well last year. Defensively, gave up a lot of points, about 36, 37 points a game on average last year. So one of the things that Coach Miles and his staff in rebuilding and retooling this football team have focused on, and again, as I mentioned, it's been a very short time, 4 years from having no football program at all to playing at the bowl level Sun Belt Conference, bowl eligible level. That's a huge jump in a very short amount of time. So what Coach Miles and his staff have focused on, number one, are legitimate Division I players, not FCS players. And he said almost from the get-go, look, we have got to get bigger and faster and stronger from the inside out. And the inside out means in the offensive and defensive line. We have got to get bigger and we've got to get stronger. So that's one of the focusing points on this football team heading into this season, was to bring in some guys that would give us a little bit of size on the front line. They brought in a kid, Taylor Evans, 6'4", 285. Alex Storr, 6'2", 275, but a real fire plug. The only returning offensive lineman is A.J. Kaplan, is the only senior on the line. He's 6'4", just a tad under 300. And then on the other side of the line, Steve Wolgamott, 6'6", 315, and Michael Ivory, 6'5", 360. So you can kind of see they got a lot bigger on the offensive line. Same thing on the defensive side. Shawanye Lawrence, 6'4", 270, one of the returning players on the defensive side. He was 17 years old last year. He's basically a young pup playing first year D1 football in the Georgia State program. And then they brought in a kid, another defensive end, Tevin Jones, at 6'4", 270. And they play a 3-4, or a kind of a hybrid 3-4. So the ability or the need to get bigger and faster defensively as well as offensively were vital in the process of building this football program. As I said, we didn't run the football very well. There's going to be a good battle at quarterback. Nick Arbuckle is a junior college kid they brought in from California. I think they like his leadership ability. They like what they've seen from him in spring practice. Threw for nearly 7,000 passing yards and 73 touchdowns in 2 years at junior college out in California. Ronnie Bell returns. He's a local Atlanta kid from Tyrone, Georgia, but who transferred back after starting his college career at Ohio University. So those two are going to battle for the starting position. We'll see who wins out in the end. I think that running back-wise, I think we ran the ball a little bit better as the year went on, but I'm hoping we're going to run it better with a bigger and stronger offensive line that should open some holes. The question is, who will grab the reins and be the number one back? I still think that, obviously fall practice will go a long way in as far as competition goes to see who's going to get a bulk of that playing time. Albert Wilson is, by and far the greatest offensive player we've had in the 4 years, but a pretty good receiver is a kid by the name of Robert Davis out of Northside Warner Robins down in South Georgia, and he's our top returning receiver. So we've got some offensive weapons, but as important as spring practice was to us, fall practice will be even more important as the competition heats up as to who will round out those two deep rosters as we head into that Abilene Christian game.
Looking forward to the future of the program, and there have been rumors circulating what would happen to Turner Field and the Georgia Dome once the Braves and Falcons respectively move into their new homes in 2017. Have there been any talks surrounding where Georgia State would play their football games after the 2016 season? Will the Panthers have their own stadium before then? Just what are the possibilities if there aren't any?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. There's no question that the Braves are going to move out of Turner Field and out of downtown Atlanta and move into a brand new facility in Cobb County. I mean, we know that that's pretty much going to happen. So the second part of that equation is what happens to Turner Field and that property down there. There have been, if you read some of the news reports, a number of different outfits or groups that are interested in possibly developing that property, Georgia State University being one of them. To be honest, and I don't say this just because I'm at Georgia State, I do think for the long-term stability of that area, that Georgia State University makes the most sense. Otherwise, you're just going to tear down Turner Field, pave it over, and do whatever someone else, would think of doing there. Is that retail? Is that some sort of housing development? I don't know. But for the area where it is, right along the downtown connector at I-75, and as close as it is to Georgia State, I do think that the university makes the best sense long-term to convert Turner Field into about a 30,000-seat football stadium, build about a 2,500 to 3,000-seat college baseball stadium close to or on the site of where Atlanta Fulton County Stadium sat those many years ago, and surround those facilities with student housing. And as I said, it all goes back to offering as much of a traditional experience as you can, being located where Georgia State is in downtown Atlanta. College football and great athletic facilities go along with student housing all in that same area. So while the land is not for sale yet, the Braves, as you know, are still playing there. Obviously, there's some planning that's going on as to what will happen once the Braves do move to Cobb County, and there's a lot of folks that are pulling for Georgia State to be right in the mix, for that property. And again, my own personal opinion is that Georgia State and the current plans that I just mentioned make the most sense for the long-term stability of that area, and to be honest, would put Georgia State over the top as far as the overall university experience goes. Right now, Georgia State is second largest in the state at about 33,000 students. You add more housing, and now you're looking to get up to that 35 to 40,000 range. Which really does change the dynamic somewhat of what Georgia State was and what Georgia State is now and what it can be here in the next 5 to 10 years.
One final thing before we end the interview. Football season is a very, very short time away, and the Panthers, they're entering their second season as a Sun Belt team with home games against Arkansas State, Texas State, Air Force, and, of course, Georgia Southern. So if you could say a few words to people who aren't familiar with the program and what they're all about, what would you say to try to bring them out to the Georgia Dome this season to watch the Panthers?
Well, it's getting folks to follow your program, beyond your circle, meaning our circle of the Georgia State community. It just takes time. As you know, we're in a state that has established programs over at Athens, and another one downtown about 4 miles from campus, and another one that's about 4 hours southeast of us in Statesboro. So Georgia State's the new kid on the block. If you're a person who has no affiliation with either of those three schools or any other of the schools that may not be Division I that are located around the state, Georgia State is an interesting program. It's the opportunity to become a part of something and to follow something, not anymore quite from its inception because, again, we're going into season number 5, but in terms of college football programs that we know and that we see every day, it's a baby. But it's a baby that's been forced to grow quickly and to walk and run right away because of the competition that we're playing, not only in the Sun Belt Conference, but the non-conference opponents as well. But, sometimes people like to see things from the very beginning or close to the very beginning, and this is an opportunity to follow a program that Bill Curry started, grew from virtually nothing, and one that now Trent Miles has taken the reins of from Coach Curry and continues to build into a solid mid-major Division I program. To me, the next biggest exciting thing and that will legitimize the Georgia State football program, and I don't know whether it's 2 years, whether it's 3 years, whether it's 5 years, I just don't know because it's tough to predict. I hope it's sooner than later. But it will be when Georgia State makes that first bowl game. It will remind me of 1990-91 when Bob Reinhardt took that Georgia State basketball team, won the Trans-America Athletic Conference tournament, and made the school's first NCAA tournament when they played Arkansas Romney in downtown Atlanta. The next great achievement and accomplishment, not only within Georgia State athletics, but for the Georgia State football program, will be when wins enough football games to become bowl eligible. And the Sun Belt is now affiliated with 3 going on 4 bowls. So the opportunity is there, and I think that Coach Miles will be able to do it. But it'll be an exciting day when the Georgia State football program reaches and makes its first bowl game. That will be the next big thing that happens to legitimize Georgia State football and Georgia State athletics. And for fans, it's an opportunity to get aboard now and come out and see some exciting football in a world-class facility like the Georgia Dome, which many folks have been to for other events, including Atlanta Falcons games. So again, it's just an opportunity to become a part of something that's only going into its 5th season of existence.
Voice of the Panthers, David Cohen, joining Sports Overdrive this afternoon to discuss Georgia State Panther football as well as his thoughts surrounding the upcoming season. And David, it was a pleasure talking Panther football with you, and I'm more excited for football now than I was 20 minutes ago, and that's always a fantastic feeling to have. But thank you again for your time, and go Panthers.
Yeah, appreciate it, Tyler. Anytime. Always enjoy talking Georgia State and Georgia State football, and you're right about that. It seems like the season last year just ended. But there's a lot of excitement going on during the off season as we get ready for year number 5. And if anybody is interested, they can get more information online at GeorgiaStateSports.com. And if they want ticket information, they can look online, and they can also call 1-866-GA-STATE. But appreciate you having me on. Go Panthers, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the Georgia Dome.
And that was voice of the Georgia State Panthers, Dave Cohen, on Sports Overdrive this afternoon. We talked about the Georgia State Panthers football program and their transition into the Sun Belt Conference. Also talked about their head coach, Trent Miles, and also what can the Panthers expect after the 2016 season with the Braves and Falcons both moving from their home stadiums. Could Georgia State take over one of those stadiums? We don't really know. But it was a great interview nonetheless with Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers. We'll have more show in just a few moments. This is Sports Overdrive.